It's the morning of September 28, 1994. George Revelle, a banker and the mayor of Fremont Hills, calls 911.
Sir, I need to verify she's breathing again, okay? Because if you can't find a pulse, you need to make sure she's breathing. I'm going to tell you what to do.
Lisa Ravel, an Ozark elementary school teacher and George's wife, has been shot.
She's still breathing. She's kind of gasping. Is that her moaning? Yes. Okay. How old is she? 37.
According to George, a masked intruder broke into his home, shot Lisa, and left through the garage. Authorities scoured the city looking for a man wearing nylon stockings on his head, a backwards ball cap, and dark pants. No luck. Nobody matching George's description is ever detained. Lisa Ravel would pass away at Cox South a few minutes later. From Color 10 News and Ozarks Fox, this is Crime Traveler, a look back on criminal acts in the Ozarks and the news investigations that followed them. I'm John Adams.
These people were awakened by their alarm going off and also the sound of movement in their house.
Later that day, Christian County Sheriff Steve Whitney shares George Revelle's story with local news outlets.
The husband had a shotgun in a closet in an adjoining bathroom, their master bedroom. He went in to get the shotgun, and he started out of the bathroom with the shotgun and heard, "Don't move or I'll blow your head off." And at that time he realized that they had his wife. And then a male voice, called him by name to come on into the bedroom.
Color 10's Cheryl Matthews was among the crowd of reporters.
These court documents obtained by Color 10 reveals that George Revelle told an investigator that the alleged intruder told him to, quote, abort the alarm system, talking about the Revelle's home security system. But these documents show that the alarm company says no entry was made at that time. These documents also show that when Lisa Ravel was shot, the alarm did go off, and the alarm company called the Revelle's neighbors. Within 3 minutes of that gunshot, the neighbors looked outside toward the Revelle's home and say they saw no one running from the house and no activity in the area.
Whitney would continue his statement, saying that the perpetrator referred to George as Banker George, which led police to believe that this might have been an attempt at bank extortion. The FBI was called in to look into Revelle's finances.
What I remember most from day one, especially from day one, was how improbable the story sounded.
Ron Davis was a reporter for the Springfield News Leader at the time of Lisa Ravelle's murder.
And then these people who called him Banker George fled into the mist of a dawn and were never seen from again. And that was the story. And just from the get-go, it sounded fishy at best, and a deliberate deception at worst.
Davis got the chance to speak with Revelle one-on-one a few days after the murder.
Went to his lawyer's office to ask the question, "Did you kill your wife?" And I asked, "Did you kill your wife?" And he said, "Well, I just, no." And at that point, the reporter in me thought, that's really not a really well done answer. I think the answer is no, absolutely not. I didn't kill my wife, and let's find the people who did. His lawyer wasn't happy with his answer.
For the next month, police searched Revelle's home for a .45 caliber pistol. They didn't find it, but they did find a letter. The letter was from Lisa to George, stating, "I can't continue living this way. I'm afraid of you, afraid of your anger and your silence."
And normally you'd think a spouse is going to write a letter saying, "Dear George, I can't believe you're this. I can't believe you're such a jerk." But she wrote it in a memo, and she said in the memo, "I'm doing a to George from Lisa memo because this is the only type of correspondence you'll pay attention to." And it kind of painted that things weren't so happy in the Revelle household.
Then the FBI uncovered details regarding Revelle's finances.
March 15th, Revelle appears before a Christian County grand jury and repeats his story. Then, 2 weeks later, on March 31st, 1995, a federal grand jury hands down 18 indictments against Revelle. Most of the charges accuse Revelle of embezzling more than $54,000 from Ozarks Bank, where he was vice president.
April 4th, the Christian County grand jury indicts Revelle on first-degree murder charges. They believed Revelle killed his wife to collect a $500,000 life insurance policy. 2 months later, Revelle pleads guilty to federal embezzlement and money laundering charges. On September 7, 1995, the day he was to be sentenced on the federal conviction, an anonymous letter arrived in the Christian County Sheriff's Office. The letter said the murder weapon could be found in a pond, and specific directions were given towards Warren County. The letter also stated Revelle was innocent and that Lisa's death was a botched extortion attempt that was planned by George's half-brother. The police are able to find that gun that was used to shoot Lisa Ravel with the anonymous letter. The gun was wrapped in duct tape and was located on George's half-brother's rented land. The letter would later be analyzed for any DNA evidence. No connection to Revelle was found. Revelle began his 27-month prison sentence in October of 1995. 6 months later, in the spring of '96, George went on trial for murder before a jury. The prosecution said they would show that George murdered his wife to free himself from debt. In their opening statement, they revealed that George purchased a life insurance policy on Lisa, making himself the sole beneficiary.
The evidence in this case will be that in May of 1994,
Christian County Prosecutor Mark Orr.
Life insurance was first obtained on the life of Lisa Ravel in the amount of $500,000. That this amount would double in the event Lisa Ravel was killed by means of an accidental death.
The jury listened to the 911 call George made that morning.
What's the problem there, sir? We've got an intruder and he shot my wife.
KOLR 10 reporter Melissa Moon.
Possibly the most dramatic moment of the Revelle trial so far came when the prosecution introduced into evidence the 911 tape made the night Revelle's wife was murdered. Revelle bowed his head and fought back tears as the 11-minute call was played.
Hey, how do you know she was shot? Did you hear her shoot? Yes. He was holding the gun at her and told me to turn the alarm off. Okay, where is he at? Huh? Where is he at? He really went for it. What? I don't think he really intended to shoot.
Former KOLR 10 anchor and reporter Melissa Moon recalls sitting in a side room next to the courtroom and watching the trial unfold through a video screen.
You could hear her moaning, and then you could not hear her moaning at points. So during the trial, George Revelle's defense attorney asked the investigator, well, what do you think? He was implying that George was leaving his wife, so that's why you could not hear her moaning at some points. He was walking away.
So you think he was just taking a pleasure walk at 5 in the morning and leaving Lisa, who had just been murdered? Is that what you're saying?
No, sir. I think he was hiding the gun in the house.
Oh, I see.
And that's what everyone, in the courtroom or the where I was with the reporters, kind of like, that was like an aha moment of the trial when they were able to say that, yeah, he was hiding the weapon in the house. That's why you couldn't hear him.
The letter from Lisa to George was read out loud to the jury. 7 people took the stand that day, including Revelle's neighbor, who testified that he didn't see anyone leaving from the house after getting a call from the alarm system going off. The prosecution asked a forensic analyst to testify that the duct tape wrapped around the gun contained fibers similar to the carpet in Revelle's home. The duct tape was also similar to duct tape used on a dryer hose.
It's my opinion that they were from the same roll or manufactured by the same company.
2 police officers testified that they found the garage door was ajar, motion detecting lights were active, and the family dog barked whenever they were present. They also stated there were no footprints in the wet grass leading to or from the house. Friends of Revelle took the stand, revealing that they had conversations with him about a .45 caliber pistol and whether it would be adequate for home defense. An alarm system expert said only one zone of the alarm system had been triggered that morning, the alarm for the bedroom window, which he said was set off by the blast of the shooting. On day 5, George Revelle took the stand.
Just as I was doing that, I heard a gunshot,
and I heard this same voice say, "Oh, shit." And I stepped back into the bedroom, jumped back into the bedroom probably, and said, "What happened?"
Revelle's testimony contradicts the testimony of officers who worked the case. Investigators have testified that George told them the morning of the shooting he was awakened by the beeping of his home alarm system. Earlier this week, a burglar alarm expert demonstrated the beeping noise and said the alarm could only be set off if someone opened an outside door. The alarm expert said on the morning of the murder, no doors were violated. The prosecution also maintains Revelle did nothing to help his wife after the shooting and never administered first aid as the 911 operator instructed. Today, the defense replayed the 911 call and let Revelle tell his side of the story.
I know she was trying to tell me to stop the bleeding, but I never left that spot to go get a towel. I wasn't thinking very good, for one thing.
George explains that the letter from Lisa to him was something he saved when they were having trouble in the relationship. Revelle's defense attorney asked the question everyone wants answered.
Now would be the time, if you took her life, if you were the person that did that, to say, yes, I did it, but please give me mercy. And what is your position at this time under oath as to whether or not you pulled the trigger on that gun?
I loved Lisa very, very much, and I did not kill her, and I don't know who killed her, and I just pray to God that someday we find out. But it wasn't me, and if I could have been killed myself that morning instead of her, I would have done it that way. And I've made mistakes at the bank, and I don't know, maybe God's punishing me for that. But I love Lisa. You can bring every teacher and principal up here you want, and they can't tell you how wonderful she was. Because she was my whole life. And she was my best friend for 17 and a half years. And I could never have taken her away from our kids.
On February 11th, 1996.
We, the jury, having found the defendant George Revelle guilty of murder in the first degree, now assess and declare the punishment of imprisonment for life without eligibility for probation or parole.
Ron Davis.
He just came across at trial as somebody the jury absolutely didn't believe. He may not have looked or acted like a murderer, but he certainly didn't appear to be the grieving innocent spouse that he claimed to be. It was the coldness of George Revelle that I remember most. In interviewing him and seeing him at trial, he just had one of the flattest affects of anyone I'd ever seen, and it came across as cold. And I think that was probably his problem with the jury at the first trial, was they saw a banker. And, you know, there's a certain mindset that comes to that, but then they also knew about the fact that he had some money troubles. Most devastating definitely was the Lisa to George memo, because I don't think there was anybody on the jury who went, that's the way I'm going to talk to my spouse or my significant other, is via a handwritten memo. And that really painted a pretty clear picture of the dynamic inside the Revelle house in Fremont Hills. And, you know, if most people went, oh, so the rich guy killed his wife. We'll put him in prison. And they did. And I genuinely thought that would be the end of all of it.
November 1997. The Missouri Court of Appeals vacated the conviction, ruling that the letter written by Lisa Ravel 6 months prior to the murder was inadmissible hearsay and should not have been admitted into evidence. The retrial began in December 1998. Defense attorney Sean Askinosie handled the appeal.
Sean Askinosie was a very, very good defense attorney. And Sean was just able to point out inconsistencies that gave enough for reasonable doubt.
Askinosie attacked the sheriff's office for failing to adequately investigate the anonymous letter and questioned their belief that Revelle had hid the murder weapon in the home because it was not found, even though investigators spent more than 1,000 hours in the home looking for clues.
I mean, Sean was the premier defense lawyer at the time, but I don't think he came up with something that was clear-cut proof that George Revelle was indeed an innocent who had nothing to do with his wife's death. But Sean, it was a really good case, and he really argued it better than Bill Wendt.
Askinosie called a financial expert who testified that Revelle was not hopelessly in debt, but then in fact his debts would have been resolved over time with bonuses and other payments he expected to receive. He brought in an expert who said the fibers found on the duct tape could have been found in any number of carpets in any number of homes. The duct tape was no different than any other duct tape found in a hardware store. Lastly, Askinosie brought in an alarm expert who used a replica of Revelle's system to show that an intruder could have gotten into the home, and the display would have read just as police had found it on the morning of the murder. In fact, the expert said the alarm had been poorly programmed, improperly installed, and was untrustworthy as any sort of evidence. On December 13th, 1998, the jury acquitted Revelle.
Rarely do you ever see anybody, whether it's a first trial or a retrial, acquitted of murder. You might have a second degree, manslaughter, lesser included offenses, but rarely does the jury say, not guilty, the man accused of killing someone gets to go free. And when it happened, it was just a stunner. But it was also Sean Askinosie, and I think his impact on the case, arguing before the Court of Appeals, getting a motion for a new trial granted, doing the new trial, and then acquitting him. That's a guy who was at the top of his game. And had he not been, George Revelle would still be in prison right now. Should he be there? I don't know. I'd like to believe that the jury got it right the second time. But I still have my doubts because you trust your gut after a while.
The $1 million insurance policy was paid to Revelle's children. 4 days after the acquittal, Revelle was released from the federal embezzling sentence.
George Revelle probably got away with murder. Let's just be candid about it. He probably got away with killing his wife. His life was never the same after that, and maybe that's the karma, whatever you want to call it. But he's free, and it sure beats sitting in prison for the rest of your life, which is what he was facing after the first trial.
Our researchers were not able to find where Revelle is now.
He had soft hands. I remember that from a handshake. He had banker's hands. He's clearly not working a construction site or delivering pizza. He's a white-collar guy, educated, good with numbers, good with fudging numbers, apparently. Ask the people at the bank. I'd like to believe, because I am a believer in karma, I'd like to believe that he's having difficulties, that there are hardships in his world, and that is the payback for being a free human being. Of course, karma doesn't always work, and he could be living the comfortable life on some beach somewhere, in which case he can be laughing at all of this and say, well, too bad you guys. I'm an innocent man according to a jury, and you can't try me again, so screw you guys. I want to believe the karma.
Crime Traveler is a Color 10 News and Ozarks Fox podcast. For exclusive video from the Color 10 News archive related to this story and others, go to ozarksfirst.com/Crime Traveler. Our producer is Tony Wynn. Our executive producer is Colin Lingo. Our research team is Eric Reedus and Lisa Hamlin. I'm John Adams. Thanks for listening.